Story of the famous Shakespearean tragedy. Hamlet. Hamlet was the king of Denmark's only son. He loved his parents and was delighted in his relationship with a lovely woman named Ophelia. Polonius, her father, was the king's chamberlain. While Hamlet was abroad at Wittenberg studying, his father passed away. When he learned that the king had been fatally bitten by a snake, young Hamlet hurried home in anguish. The young prince had loved his father so deeply. He felt resentment and sorrow when he discovered that the queen, his mother, had decided to remarry, and to marry the deceased king's brother within a month of the king's death and burial. Hamlet refused to put off mourning for the wedding. "It's not only the black clothing I wear that indicates my loss," he remarked. "My heart is filled with sorrow for my deceased father. His child at least remembers him and still mourns for him." Then Claudius, the king's brother, said, "This sadness is unwarranted. Obviously, you should lament the death of your father, but—" "Alas," Hamlet replied regretfully, "I cannot forget my loved ones in 1 month." The queen and Claudius then left him to celebrate their wedding, forgetting the poor, compassionate king who had been so kind to them. Hamlet, left alone, started to think and question himself about what he should do. Because he did not believe the tale of the snakebite. It seemed to him that the evil Claudius had murdered the king in order to obtain the throne and marry the queen. Having no evidence, he was unable to accuse Claudius. During this time, Horatio, one of his fellow students from Wittenberg, arrived. Hamlet politely welcomed his friend before asking, "What brought you here? Why are you here?" "I came, my lord, to attend the burial of your father." "I believe it was to attend my mother's wedding," angrily said Hamlet. "My father. We will never see his likeness again." "My lord," Horatio said, "I believe I saw him last night." Then, while Hamlet listened in shock, Horatio related how he and 2 guardsmen had seen the ghost of the king on the battlements. The king's spirit arrived at the battlements at midnight, in the cold moonlight, wearing the armor he was accustomed to wearing. Hamlet was a courageous young man. Instead of running away from the ghost, he conversed with it, and when it called him, he followed it to a private area where it confirmed his suspicions. As he slept in his orchard during the afternoon, the wicked Claudius had really poisoned his brother, the king, by pouring poison into his ear. "And you," continued the spirit, "must get revenge on my evil brother for this horrible crime. However, do nothing against the queen, because I have always loved her and she is your mother. Remember me." The spirit then disappeared upon observing daylight approaching. "Now," said Hamlet, "only vengeance remains. Recall you, I will remember nothing else, education, pleasure, youth, let them all go, and only your orders will remain in my mind." So, when his comrades returned, he made them promise to keep the ghost's identity a secret. He then withdrew from the battlements, which were now colored with dawn and moonlight, to contemplate how he might best avenge his deceased father. The shock of seeing and hearing his dead father's ghost almost drove him crazy. He didn't want his uncle to notice that he wasn't normal, so he decided to act crazy in other ways to hide his crazy desire for revenge. And when he met Ophelia, who loved him and to whom he had sent gifts, letters, and many affectionate words, he acted so irrationally toward her that she could not help but believe he was insane. Because she loved him so much, she could not think he would be so cruel unless he was really insane. She then informed her father and presented him with a letter from Hamlet. And in the letter there was much foolishness, as well as this lovely verse. "Doubt that the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love." From that moment onwards, everyone thought that love was the source of Hamlet's supposed madness. Poor Hamlet was really quite unhappy. He wanted to follow his father's spirit, but he was too nice and compassionate to want to kill another man, even his father's murderer. And sometimes he questioned if the ghost was telling the truth. Just then, a group of actors arrived at the court, and Hamlet commanded them to perform a certain play for the king and queen. This drama was about a guy who was killed in his garden by a close relative, who then married the deceased man's wife. You can picture how the cruel king felt as he sat on his throne, with the queen at his side and his court around him, and saw the same wickedness he had done enacted on stage. In the play, when the evil relative put poison in the sleeping man's ear, the villain Claudius awoke and staggered out of the room, followed by the queen and others. Then Hamlet remarked to his companions, "Now I am certain that the ghost told the truth. Had Claudius not committed this murder, he would not have been so horrified to see it on stage." Now, the queen, at the king's request, called for Hamlet to chastise him for his behavior during the play and other issues, and Claudius, desiring to know precisely what happened during the meeting between mother and son, sent Polonius to hide himself behind the curtains in the queen's bedroom. And while they conversed, the queen, frightened by Hamlet's rough, unusual language, begged for help, and Polonius behind the curtain also shouted out, "Help!" Hamlet, mistaking Polonius for the king, thrusts his sword into the curtains, killing not the king but rather old Polonius. So, Hamlet had now upset his uncle and mother, and by accident, he had killed the father of the woman he loved most. "Oh! What a foolish and bloody act," the queen said. And Hamlet replied with bitterness, "Almost as awful as killing a king and marrying his brother." Then, Hamlet disclosed to the queen everything about his thoughts and how he had discovered the murder, and he pleaded with her to have no further relationship with the wicked Claudius, who had murdered the good king. As they discussed, the ghost of the king reappeared before Hamlet, but the queen was unable to see it. After the ghost had vanished, they separated. When the queen told Claudius about what had happened, including the death of Polonius, Claudius said, "This clearly shows that Hamlet is crazy. Since he killed the chancellor, we must carry out our plan and send him to England for his own safety." So, Hamlet was given to the care of 2 courtiers who worked for the king and brought letters to the English court demanding Hamlet's death. But Hamlet had the common sense to remove these letters and replace them with others that contained the names of the 2 traitorous courtiers. Then, as the ship headed to England, Hamlet escaped on a pirate ship, and the 2 evil courtiers left him to his fate before they met their own. Hamlet hurried home, but in the meantime, something terrible had happened. Wretched, beautiful Ophelia, having lost her sweetheart and her father, lost her wits as well and wandered the court in a state of sorrowful insanity, with straws, weeds, and flowers in her hair, singing strange fragments of songs, and talking poor, silly, beautiful language with no substance. And one day, upon reaching a riverbank where willows grew abundantly, she attempted to attach a floral wreath to a willow, fell into the water with all her flowers, and so drowned. Hamlet loved her, even though he tried to hide it so he wouldn't seem crazy. When he returned, he found the king and queen, as well as the rest of the court, in tears at the funeral of his beloved lady Ophelia. Laertes, who was Ophelia's brother and the son of Polonius, had just come to court to seek justice for the death of his father, old Polonius. He was so sad at the death of Ophelia that he jumped into his sister's grave to hug her again. Hamlet screamed, "I loved her more than 40,000 brothers," and jumped into the grave after him. They fought until they were separated. Afterwards, Hamlet asked Laertes to forgive him. "I couldn't stand it if anyone, not even her brother, seemed to love her more than I do," he explained, "but the cruel Claudius prevented them from becoming friends." He explained to Laertes how Hamlet had murdered old Polonius, and together they plotted a plan to murder Hamlet by treachery. Laertes challenged Hamlet to a fencing match in front of the entire court. Hamlet used the standard fencing foil, but Laertes had prepared a poison-tipped, razor-sharp blade for himself. And the evil king had prepared a cup of poisoned wine, which he intended to deliver to poor Hamlet when he became weary and thirsty from swordplay. So Laertes and Hamlet battled, and after some fencing, Laertes stabbed Hamlet with his sword. Hamlet, enraged by this treachery, because they had been fencing, not as men fight but as children play, engaged Laertes in a struggle. Both men dropped their swords, and when they picked them up again, Hamlet had changed his blunt blade for Laertes' sharp, poisoned one. With a single stab, he wounded Laertes, who was killed by his own treachery. At this time, the queen said, "The drink, the drink. Oh, my dear Hamlet. I am poisoned." She drank from the poison bowl the king had made for Hamlet, and the king saw the queen, whom he loved despite being evil, die by his hand. Then, Ophelia, Polonius, the queen, Laertes, and the 2 courtiers who had been sent to England were all dead, and Hamlet finally found the courage to do the ghost's bidding and avenge his father's murder, which, if he had had the strength and courage to do it earlier, would have spared the lives of everyone but the wicked king, who deserved to die. Hamlet, finally having the courage to do what was right, turned the poisoned sword on the false king. "Then, venom, do your work," he cried, and the king passed away. Thus, Hamlet finally fulfilled the promise he made to his father, and with everything accomplished, he passed away. And those who saw his death did so with prayers and tears, because his friends and people loved him with all their hearts. Thus concludes the sad story of Prince Hamlet of Denmark.